Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Mrs. Doris K Pliskin. Rabbi Yehuda Myers will be officiating. We welcome those of you who are joining us online. This time, for those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off.
We will begin our service this morning with a few chapters of Psalms. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzas risha'im u'b'derech ha'atim lo amad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav ki im besoras Adonai chefzo u'v'soraso yege yamam v'layla V'haya ke'etz shasul al palgei mayim asher piryo yitain bito v'alehu lo yibal v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach lo chen harisha'im kim kamotz asher tidfenu ruach al ken lo yakumu risha'im b'mishpat V'chatoim badas tzadikim Ki yodeya Adonai derech tzadikim V'derech rishaim toved. We continue in English. You can follow along the little pamphlets. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, he restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of the righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Tradition is that the funeral of an Eshes Chayil, of a woman of valor such as Doris, the custom is to recite Eshes Chayil. Eshes Chayil mi yimtza, v'rachok mipnimni mechra, batach ba leiv bala, v'shalal lo yechsar. Gemala suto v'lo ra kol yimei chayeha, darshat semer ufishim ta'as v'chefetz kapeha. Haisaka niyo socher mimerchak tavi lachma, V'takam be'or layla v'titeren teref levesa v'chok l'na'aroseha. Zemama sadeva tikacheyu mipi chaper natacharem. Chag Rabbi Oz masneha v'ta'amitz ziroseha. Tama kitav sachra lo yichbe be'layla nera. Yedeha shulcha b'kishar v'chapeho tamchu falach. Kapar pasa li'ani v'yadeha shulcha le'evyon. Lasira besa mishala ki chalvesa levush shanim. Marvadim asa salah, sheish urgerman levusha, noda basharim ba'ala b'shifto im zikne aretz. Sadin asa v'atimkor, v'chagor nasan alaknani, oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak liyom acharon. Piha pascha bechachma v'soras chesed al lishona, Sophia halichos pesa velechem atzlus lo sochel. Kamu bana vayashua ba'ala vayahalala. Rabos banos asuchel va'at alis al kulana. Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi. Isha yiras Adonai. He halal. Grace is false, and beauty is vain. A woman in awe of God, she should be praised. Tinu la mi priya deha v'haleluha b'shari maseha. Give her the fruits of her hand, and let her deeds praise her in the gathering places. We now call upon Dr. Neil Pliskin to please deliver a eulogy.
I stand here today as a representative of the Pliskin family. Thank you for coming today and sharing your memories of our mother and grandmother, Doris Kuperman Pliskin. For those who do not know my mother, she was born in Chicago to a working-class family. Her beloved parents, Harry and Pauline Kuperman, were first-generation Americans. She attended Marshall High School in Chicago, and that summer, she met my father, Morton Pliskin, working at one of the kosher resorts in South Haven, Michigan. He, already a boy cantor, which he learned from his father, Abraham, also a cantor, and both on their way to the University of Minnesota, where my mom, Doris, obtained her bachelor's degree in education. When they married, my dad was still 20, and they joked that his father had to sign the marriage certificate. What a lovely and beautiful couple they were. They were married for 57 years when he died in January 2008. Of course, one cannot talk about my mother without talking about my father, as their lives and their commitment to Judaism and Jewish education and values were shared with us, their children, who clearly made sacrifices for. Anyway, my father took his first cantorial job at Mikra Kodesh Synagogue in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where my own wife and family are from. They moved to Chicago in the early 1960s, first living on the south side where my father was a cantor at CKI, and in 1963 to the north side, Peterson Park, to the job at AG Beth Israel, the synagogue I grew up in. My mother was so proud of my father, and he made her feel like royalty. She was so proud to be part of AG Beth Israel, and they had many friends there. Then came the move to Lincolnwood Jewish the merge to Lincolnwood Jewish congregation, and it was cruel irony that my father, who sang at both synagogues, never had the opportunity to lead the service. Anyway, but I know that my mother Doris and my father Mort left their mark on synagogue life. When my father died, my mother was honestly never the same. She used to say, Nothing will bring back my husband. And she wasn't consolable. Then illness took over. She developed many strokes and eventually a vascular dementia that left her unable to speak for at least the last 3 years, which was torture for us all. Without the amazing support from her dedicated caregivers, Sal, Maggie, and Marie Helene, I probably would have been standing up here 3 years ago. The thing to know about my mother is that she supported my father in his calling in every way. She was a complicated woman with many contradictions. She was an educated woman who had her own career as a speech and language pathologist, obtained her master's degree, and taught oral communication to deaf children, her claim to fame being that Marlee Matlin was one of her students. She was also a dedicated Jewish mother, and I mean that in the most positive way, involved in our lives and making sure we were taken care of. Sometimes she could be a little over-involved. Neil, who are you going out with tonight? Where are you going? What time are you going to be back? Mom, I'm 30. Is it any wonder I became a psychologist? She was involved in our lives, and she did her best to uphold the Jewish values so important to our family. As a parent, I respect that. As a son, there's a large hole in my life that cannot be filled. Mom, I hope and pray that your soul is at peace and back with Dad.
So I wanted to just say a few words today about Doris. The first time I met Doris was in the spring of 1988 when Neil brought me home to meet his parents for the first time. Doris and Mort made this wonderful barbecue, and we sat outside in their backyard. I was a nervous wreck before I got there. Changed clothes 15 times at least. We had something in common, which was that I grew up in Minneapolis and went to the University of Minnesota, where they both went. We had lots of fun times talking about the various buildings at the University of Minnesota. Not only that, but Mort became the cantor at the same shul where my mother and her family davened on the north side of Minneapolis. Then we discovered that Neil and I were born in the same hospital, 8 years apart. For the most part, this was all a happy coincidence, or not so much of a coincidence at all. Doris and Mort lost their baby in Minneapolis, Michael David, to SIDS, and several years later, they moved to Chicago. Over the years, Neil and I visited the cemetery in Minneapolis, where Michael David was buried, which hopefully brought comfort to Doris and Mort. I learned so much from Doris over the years, the good and the not so good. I learned to make her chicken soup and matzo ball soup, which our family grew to love and which is now passed on to Lauren, our daughter, and hopefully Josh. Doris was a real force. She had a strong personality, said what she thought without hesitation, and was fiercely passionate about her work as a speech and language pathologist. She was devoted to her kids she taught sign language to and worked on their speech for many years. Her very nice claim to fame, which I didn't know Neil was saying this, we said the same thing, is that she worked extensively with Oscar winner Marlee Matlin. When she retired from Bell School, she worked with kids in their homes and traveled with her toys and supplies in her trunk of her car all over Chicago. She was to be admired for all she did for hundreds of kids and parents. Doris was meticulous in keeping a well-kept house. I always knew when Doris was anxious about something to do with Mort or her kids or her grandchildren. Her kitchen floor was always spotless. And every time she came to our house, I also became anxious and made a very spotless floor. When I was sick, I especially learned from Doris what it means to be a devoted wife. She was always by her husband's side at every wedding, bar bat mitzvah, or funeral, and everything in between. I'm grateful to have seen their love and care for each other through the many ups and downs of life and how they endured everything together. She has been rather lost these 14 years without him. Her end of life was one of struggle and sadness in many ways. When I was sick many years ago now, when Mort and Neil had the opportunity to travel together, she came up to Buffalo Grove and wanted to be there for me. And she wanted to go take me to the MRI and to sit there in the waiting room as long as it all took. She drove me to the pharmacy. She did a lot of things for me during that time. And I was never comfortable with her helping me. I always wanted to do it on my own, but she stuck by me. She said to me, "Tony, I'm here for you. You will need to be there for me one day as well." I hope I have been, Doris. I hope I've been there for you as best as I can. Good. Lastly, I want to thank her very loving caregivers, Sal, Maggie, and Marie. They loved her and took care of her like Doris was their own mother. We as a family could not thank you enough, Maggie, Sal, and Marie. Your tender, loving hands and care and devotion will always be in our hearts forever. Thank you.
We're here this morning to mourn the passing of an neshama ne'ima, a graceful soul, Dovrish Bas Tzvi Hirsch, Doris Pliskin. I never had the privilege to meet or spend time with Doris personally. However, over the past few days, I have been able to get a glimpse into the sparkling gem that Doris was for her family and community. Havir Harim Salul Kayayin. For thousands of years, our people yearn to once again live freely in the city of our dreams, the city of gold, Jerusalem. To be able to walk the streets of the old city, to pour out our hearts at the kotel, the western wall, and to connect with the root of our existence. And 55 years ago from Sunday, we merited to once again be reunited with our beloved city of Jerusalem. However, the profundity of our connection with the city of Jerusalem goes well beyond that which meets the eye. In our biblical and rabbinic literature, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, is given numerous descriptions. I want to focus on three that are presently particularly pertinent. Yerushalayim is described as the Ir Shechubra Layachdav, the city which creates connections and community. It is described as Kimitzion Teitzei Torah, the source of Torah, of education. And thirdly, it is described as Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, the city of gold. Community and connection. The city of community, of achdut, of unity. Yerushalayim was a city that brought everyone together. It was a central focus of the Yomim Tovim, of the holidays. On each of the three major holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, we became a united community centered around Jerusalem. It was a place where families celebrated and created lifelong memories. Yerushalayim was a center of Torah, of education and inspiration. The Sanhedrin, our great sages, the teachers and decisives of Torah law, dwelled in the city of Jerusalem, the beating heart of the spiritual soul of our people was and is in Jerusalem. From all over the world, to this day, Jews come to learn, to be connected, to be inspired in Jerusalem. And lastly, the Ir Shel Zahav, the radiating city of gold. Yerushalayim was and is a glimmering golden city. Perhaps more than anything, Yerushalayim is our guiding light. It is a place towards which we direct our prayers. It is a godly connection between the entire Jewish people, the place where heaven and earth kiss. It is our North Star. Doris Pliskin, Alaa Shalom, was the Yerushalayim for her family, and she exemplified those pristine qualities as well. Community and connection. She first and foremost, throughout her entire life, showed tremendous dedication and commitment to her family, to her husband. She was the beating heart of her family's Yomim Tovim, Shabbos experiences, Jewish tradition through thick and thin. Education and inspiration. She made it her priority to send their 3 kids to day school at a time when it wasn't so popular, to Ida Crown, to Hillel Torah. Her children receiving a complete Jewish education was of utmost importance to her, and she made sure to provide that for them. The shimmering gem, the golden example. Much like Jerusalem, Doris was the guiding light. She inspired her family to always live lives connected with each other and their heritage. She was the beating heart of her family. She was their North Star as well. Through her word and deed, she showed her family what it meant to be committed to Judaism, even when it wasn't easy. Up until her final years, Doris always made an extreme effort to come to shul each and every Shabbos. However, what many of us may not realize is that Doris, as their incredible, loving, loyal, and supportive wife of her late husband Mort, she wasn't only the Jerusalem of her family, but she was the Jerusalem of our entire community as well. Together, Doris and Mort, they drew the community into shul every Shabbos and holiday. Together, they led the services on thousands of holidays and Shabbosim, connecting countless Jews with their heritage and Father in heaven. Together, they taught hundreds of bar and bat mitzvah students, and together, they inspired thousands of Jews here in Lincolnwood and beyond. Doris, you weren't just your family's Jerusalem, you were our community's. I know I speak on behalf of so many members of our community and beyond that we will forever miss you. However, even though we are here today mourning, we know that Doris's love and teachings will live on through her beautiful family, her children, her grandchildren, and the entire LJC AGBI community. Tehei nishmata tzura b'tzor ha'chaim. We will conclude this portion of the service with a kalmale. Please rise. El malei rachamim, shochein ba'meromim. Hamtzei menucha nechana, al kanfei ha'shechina. B'ma'alos kedoshim mitarim, kezarakia mazhirim. Es nishmas, Dovrish Bas Tzvi Hirsch, Shehalcha la'alama, Ba'avur, Shanach mispalalim, Ba'ad Haskaras Nishmasa, Beganin Temenuchasa, Lachein Balarachamim, Yastira B'Seser Kenafav la'alamim, Bitzror, Bitzrachim es nishmasa, Adonai hu nachalasa, V'senuach, B'shalom amishkava, V'nomar Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment will continue at West Lawn Cemetery located at 7801 West Montrose. The family will be together for Shiva for a traditional period of time at the Pliskin residence at 4021 West Estes Avenue in Lincolnwood. Masks are required to enter the home, and please do not bring any food. Please note that today and Saturday night are going to be private family Shiva. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it'll be strictly between 2 to 4 p.m., and depending on the weather, we're going to try to do it outside, keeping in mind the rise of the numbers during this pandemic. Memorial contributions to the Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation, AG Beth Israel, would be appreciated. For those of you who are joining us online, all that information is on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the funeral procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. And please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Doris K Pliskin from the chapel, and then you may return to your cars. If I could have the grand people, we're going to be Paul there.